A mechanic saved little twin girls from a burning car. Next morning, helicopters filled his farm. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The sun was beginning to set on a quiet farm, nestled on the outskirts of a small town. The hum of the city's distant noise seemed miles away, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the cool evening breeze. It was a peaceful night, the kind that made you believe everything in the world was right. But for James Thompson, that calm was about to be shattered by an unexpected twist of fate. James was a mechanic by trade, known in town for his skill with engines and his unassuming demeanor. He wasn't the kind of man who craved the spotlight. His life was simple, modest even, consisting of long hours at his auto repair shop and quiet evenings at home with his dog. His hands, calloused from years of working under hoods, had fixed more cars than he could count. And yet, nothing could have prepared him for the events that would unfold that night. It was just another evening when James was locking up the garage. The moon was bright, casting a silvery glow over the dirt road that led to his house. His truck sat parked beside the garage, and the world seemed still. That was, until he heard it, screeching tires and the unmistakable sound of a car crashing. Without thinking, James ran towards the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. A car, engulfed in flames, sat in the middle of the road, smoke billowing from its windows. His first thought was to call for help, but as the fire grew, he realized there wasn't time. The flames were spreading too fast. But then, through the thick smoke, he saw movement. Two small figures, trapped inside the vehicle. Without hesitation, James dashed toward the burning car. His mind raced, but his body moved on instinct. The heat from the flames felt unbearable, but he didn't care. He had to save them. Reaching the car, he grabbed the door handle and yanked it with all his strength. It was stuck. Panic set in for just a second, but then James remembered the tools he always kept in his truck. Racing back to it, he grabbed a crowbar and returned to the car. With a few powerful swings, the door finally gave way. Inside, two little girls, no older than 6, sat frozen in terror. Without thinking, James scooped them up, one in each arm, and ran, praying that they would make it out alive. Just as he reached a safe distance, the car exploded behind him, the force of the blast sending him sprawling to the ground. He managed to shield the girls with his body, feeling the searing heat but not daring to let go. The next few minutes felt like a blur. Sirens wailed in the distance, and soon, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles lit up the night. Paramedics rushed to the scene, taking over from James, who was now exhausted and shaken. As they took the girls to the ambulance, one of them whispered, "Thank you." James nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. It was over. The girls were safe. But what James didn't know was that this single act of courage would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The very next morning, as he sat on his porch sipping coffee, he noticed something strange, helicopters hovering above his farm. At first, he thought it was some kind of police or rescue operation, but then he saw them land. A group of men and women, dressed in sharp suits, stepped out. They weren't from the local town. They had come for him, and they had come to offer him something that would change everything. I woke up the next morning to the sound of helicopters. At first, James thought it was just a routine emergency response, something local. But as the chopper blades roared closer, he saw them. 2 sleek black helicopters descending toward his farm. The sound was deafening as they landed, kicking up dust and dirt, and soon men and women dressed in formal business attire emerged, their faces serious but not unfriendly. James squinted, still in his pajamas, his heart racing as he stood on his porch, unsure of what was happening. Was this some sort of mistake? But then he saw the man at the front of the group, tall and well-dressed, walking toward him with a confident stride. He had a commanding presence, and his face, though stern, showed a glint of appreciation. "James Thompson?" the man asked, his voice deep and measured. "Yes, that's me," James replied, confused but trying to keep his composure. "You're the man who saved the twin girls last night?" the man continued. I just did what anyone would have done," James muttered, suddenly feeling uncomfortable under their gaze. The man smiled slightly, almost as if he expected that response. We know exactly what you did, and we know that you risked your life to save them. That's why we're here. James's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I'm David Carter, the man introduced himself. I represent the Carter Foundation. The girls you saved are my nieces. Their parents, my brother and sister-in-law, want to personally thank you for what you did. James's mind was spinning. He had saved 2 girls from a burning car. That much he knew. But now, standing here on his porch in front of strangers in suits, he realized he had no idea who the girls really were, let alone that their family was one of the wealthiest in the country. David Carter went on to explain that their family was extremely grateful for James's bravery, and they wanted to offer him something in return, something life-changing. We'd like to offer you a generous reward, David said, handing James a business card with the Carter Foundation's logo on it. We've heard about your skills and your dream of opening your own shop. We can help with that. James looked at the card, still unsure whether this was some sort of joke. I'm just a mechanic, James said, his voice trembling slightly. I'm not looking for handouts. I just did what anyone would do. David's expression softened. This isn't a handout. It's a chance. A chance for you to do what you've always wanted to do. The girls are safe, but we want to make sure you have the opportunity to build a future, to really live the life you deserve. James felt his mind racing. He was just a mechanic, someone who had always lived in the shadows of bigger dreams. But now here he was, being offered something more than he ever could have imagined. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to decline, to retreat back into the life he knew. But another part of him, the part that had always dreamed of something more, couldn't help but wonder if this was the chance he had been waiting for. Take some time to think about it, David continued, sensing his hesitation. But know this, James. Your life just changed last night, and we want to make sure it changes for the better. With that, the group turned and began to walk back to the helicopters. But before they left, David gave James one final look, his eyes filled with a mixture of respect and something else, something that hinted at a future far beyond what James had ever imagined. As the helicopters took off, James stood there, still unsure of what to do next. His quiet life, his humble farm, and his simple work as a mechanic had all been turned upside down in a single night. And now, the question remained. Would he take the opportunity to change his life, or would he turn it down and go back to his routine? Either way, one thing was certain. His world had shifted, and there was no turning back. I woke up the next morning with a feeling of confusion and awe. The events of the previous night were still fresh in my mind. The explosions, the flames, and the twin girls I had saved. It all seemed surreal, like I had been caught in the middle of a movie. The helicopter blades from the night before echoed in my ears as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the business card David Carter had handed me. The offer to help me build my dream, to open a bigger shop, was something I never thought possible. But could I really accept? Was I ready for a life beyond my small town and simple mechanic shop? I poured myself a cup of coffee, trying to shake the feeling of uncertainty that had settled in my chest. The farm felt different now, somehow, as if the quiet, steady rhythm of my life had been interrupted, and I wasn't sure if I could get back to it. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from David. We'll be in touch soon. Take your time to think, but remember, this opportunity won't be here forever. The words were firm, yet kind, and they made the weight of the decision even heavier. I wasn't just turning down a job offer. I was turning down a chance at something bigger than I ever thought I deserved. I had spent my entire life in this small town, working day in and day out, just trying to get by. I'd always dreamed of opening a bigger shop, a place where I could expand, hire more workers, and maybe even mentor others who had the same passion for cars that I did. But that was a dream I kept to myself, never thinking it could be a reality. Now here I was, on the verge of something huge, but I was scared. I had never been someone who dealt with change well. I liked my routine. I liked knowing what to expect every day. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let this chance slip away. The thought of helping more people, of building something bigger than myself, was too compelling to ignore. But what would it cost me? My life was simple, but it was mine. The world I lived in was one where I fixed cars, talked to the locals, and spent my evenings alone on the porch. The idea of living a different life, one filled with suits, business meetings, and helicopters, was both exciting and terrifying. It wasn't just about the money or the opportunity. It was about losing myself in a world that was so different from everything I had known. I sighed and leaned back in my chair, looking out at the farm. My dog, Buddy, sat by the door, looking at me expectantly. I couldn't help but smile. Buddy had been my companion through it all, through the long hours in the shop, through the quiet nights at home. He was my constant, and I had always promised myself that I would never lose sight of the things that mattered. But was I already losing sight of them? Was I letting the allure of wealth and success cloud my judgment? The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. The air was cool, and the breeze rustled through the trees. As I sat there, lost in thought, I realized that this wasn't just a decision about money. It was about who I wanted to be, who I wanted to become. Could I take this chance and still stay true to myself? I had no answers, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change, whether I was ready or not. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the business card in my hand. The quiet of the evening had settled around me, but in my mind, the decision was anything but quiet. Could I really leave everything behind? My shop, my farm, my simple life? David Carter's words echoed in my head, and I knew that deep down, I couldn't ignore this opportunity. It was like a door had opened, one I never thought I'd see. I thought about the possibilities, expanding the shop, helping more people, building something that could make a real difference. But then, doubt crept in. I had always been just a mechanic. That's what people knew me as. The guy who fixed engines, the guy who worked late into the night to make sure people's cars were running smoothly. What if I wasn't cut out for this new life? The helicopters, the suits, the corporate world, it all felt so far from what I knew. But the thought of staying stuck in the same place forever, always wondering what if, gnawed at me. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. I had to make a decision. A part of me was still hesitant, but another part, the part that had always dreamed bigger, knew this was my chance. I dialed David's number, the ring echoing in my ear. It felt surreal. "Hello, James." David's voice came through, smooth and confident. "Have you thought it over?" I hesitated for a moment, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Yeah, I've been thinking," I finally said, my voice steady. "And I want to take you up on your offer. I want to see where this can go." There was a pause on the other end. Then David's voice was full of approval. "I knew you'd make the right choice. We're glad to have you, James. I'll send someone over tomorrow to get things started. You won't regret this." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone for a moment, not quite believing what had just happened. The simple mechanic was about to become part of something much bigger. The next day, I found myself standing in a conference room, surrounded by people in suits and dresses, all of them talking about numbers, plans, and strategies. It felt overwhelming, but at the same time, there was a certain excitement in the air. This was it. This was what I had dreamed of. "James," David said as he entered the room, "I'd like you to meet the team. These are the people who will help you turn your vision into reality." I shook hands with the group, but my mind was elsewhere. I had spent my whole life in a small town, fixing cars and talking to regular folks. Now, I was surrounded by some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the country. It was like stepping into a different world. As the meeting went on, I began to feel the pressure building. The expectations were high, and I could sense the eyes of everyone in the room on me. They wanted results. They wanted to see if I could really do this. I could feel my nerves tightening. Could I really pull this off? But then I thought about the twins I had saved, about the fire and the explosion, about the family that had come to me offering a chance to change everything. I couldn't let fear hold me back now. I had made my choice. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, planning, and hard work. I was learning quickly, adapting to this new life. The team I was working with was incredible, and David was always there to guide me. But the transition wasn't easy. I missed the quiet of my farm, the simple satisfaction of fixing a car with my own hands. But I couldn't turn back. I had made a promise to myself that I would see this through. And little by little, I started to see the results. The shop was growing, the vision was taking shape. It wasn't just about the money or the status. It was about building something meaningful. I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. I had been working nonstop for weeks, and though the momentum was starting to build, there was an underlying feeling that something wasn't quite right. The shop was growing, and the plans we had been discussing were starting to come to life, but it felt like I was losing a part of myself along the way. The quiet nights on the farm, the long hours working alone, and the satisfaction of fixing something with my own hands. Those were the things I had always cherished. Now, I was surrounded by business meetings, numbers, and expectations. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate the opportunities, I did. But there was a part of me that longed for the simplicity I had left behind. I found myself thinking about the twins I had saved, the fire, and how everything had changed since that night. I had always been a simple man, someone who enjoyed the small things in life, and now I was part of something so much bigger. The success was great, but at what cost? One night, after a particularly long day of meetings, I drove back to my farm, the cool night air rushing through the open windows of my truck. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something that made me stop. There, under the dim light of the porch, was the same old truck I had been driving for years. It was scratched, rusty, and worn, but to me, it was a symbol of everything I had worked for. I parked the truck and sat there for a moment, just staring at the headlights. The familiar feeling of being home washed over me, and it felt like the weight I had been carrying started to lift. Maybe it wasn't the fancy suits or the high-rise office that mattered. Maybe it was the work, the real work, that grounded me. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't had in weeks. I had made a decision. The team had been great, and the projects were coming along well, but I needed something more. Something real. After a quick meeting with David, I told him that I wanted to get back to my roots. I still wanted to be a part of the bigger picture, but I didn't want to lose sight of who I was. I wanted to take the vision we had been working on and bring it back to the people, to the community that had always supported me. I wanted to open a shop that wasn't just about the business, but about giving people a chance to learn and grow. David listened, nodding thoughtfully. "You've come a long way, James," he said. "And I think you're right. It's not just about building something big. It's about building something that matters. If that's what you want, then we'll support you." I left the meeting feeling lighter. The pressure I had been feeling didn't completely disappear, but I now had a clearer sense of direction. The balance I had been looking for was within reach. I wasn't giving up the success I had worked for, but I wasn't going to forget the things that truly mattered. Over the next few months, I began making plans to open a new kind of shop, a place where people could come to learn, to work on their cars, and to be part of something bigger than themselves. It wasn't just a business. It was a way to give back, to show people that hard work and dedication could lead to something more. As I stood in front of the building that would soon be my new shop, I realized that the journey I had started was far from over. The twins I had saved, the business opportunity that had come from it, and the choices I had made had all led me to this moment. I wasn't just a mechanic anymore. I was someone who could make a difference. And as I looked around, I knew that I had found my place in this world. A place where I could be true to myself and still reach for the stars. I had spent the last few months pouring my energy into the new shop. The walls were finally painted, the floor had been redone, and the workstations were set up. It was a place that felt like home. There were no high-end tools or expensive gadgets, just the basic equipment I had learned to use over the years, alongside some new additions that made the work smoother. I had started to hire a few local people, some who had the same love for cars that I did, and others who were just looking for a chance to learn. The community was slowly coming together, and I could feel the excitement building. It was exactly what I had envisioned. Still, as much as I had tried to create a space that felt familiar, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The business was growing, and with it came new responsibilities. The pressure to maintain everything I had built was beginning to weigh on me, and I started to question whether I could balance this with the life I had left behind. There were times when I'd catch myself wishing for the simplicity I once had, working on cars in my old garage, with no expectations or deadlines, just the satisfaction of a job well done. But when I looked around at the people I was helping, I realized I couldn't go back. This new chapter was bigger than me. One afternoon, I received a call from David. It had been a few weeks since we last spoke, and I hadn't expected to hear from him. "James," David said, his voice steady but with a tone of urgency. "We've got something big coming up. There's a charity event next month, and we'd like you to be our guest of honor." The words hung in the air for a moment. "Guest of honor?" I repeated, not sure I understood. "Yes," David replied. "We're hosting a fundraiser for the Carter Foundation, and we think your story would inspire people. We'd like you to attend and speak." I felt a mix of emotions, nervousness, excitement, and hesitation. I wasn't used to being in the spotlight, but I knew this was another opportunity to connect with the community, to show people that hard work and dedication could lead to something more. I don't know, I said, unsure of myself. I'm just a mechanic. I don't know if I'm the right person for this. David's voice softened, almost like he was reading my thoughts. James, you've built something incredible. You've gone from fixing cars in a small shop to opening a place that's changing lives. That's the kind of story people need to hear. You're not just a mechanic anymore. You're a symbol of what's possible when you follow your dreams. I paused, taking in his words. It wasn't just about the money or the success anymore. It was about the people I was helping, the community that had supported me. I had come this far, and I couldn't back down now. Okay, I said, my voice steady. I'll do it. As the event day drew closer, I found myself feeling more anxious than I had expected. Speaking in front of a large crowd, especially people who were far more successful than I was, felt overwhelming. But the closer I got to the event, the more I realized it wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about sharing my journey, about showing others that even someone like me, someone who started with nothing, could make a difference. The night of the fundraiser arrived, and as I stepped onto the stage, I saw the crowd of people gathered, their eyes on me. My hands trembled slightly, but I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told them about my humble beginnings, about the fire that had changed everything, and about the journey that had brought me to this moment. I spoke not as a business owner, not as someone with wealth or status, but as a mechanic who had worked hard to build something meaningful. And when I finished, there was a moment of silence before the crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't a standing ovation or a grand gesture, but it was enough. It was a reminder that my story mattered, that my journey was worth sharing. That night, I realized that success wasn't about how far I had come or how much I had achieved. It was about the impact I could make, the lives I could touch. And that was something I had never imagined in my wildest dreams. I woke up the next morning with a feeling of pride, but also unease. The applause from the night before was still ringing in my ears, but it wasn't the applause that lingered. It was the weight of the responsibility I felt. I had shared my story, but now, it felt like expectations were higher. The Carter Foundation had been incredibly supportive, and people were starting to see the shop as more than just a mechanic's garage. They saw it as a symbol of success, a place where dreams could come true. But I couldn't help but feel the pressure to keep it all going. As I sat at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee and looking out at the quiet fields, I thought about how far I had come. The shop was thriving, the team was working together, and there was a sense of pride in what we were building. But there was something deeper gnawing at me. I had promised myself I wouldn't lose sight of the things that mattered, but I could feel myself slipping. The demands of the business, the pressure to succeed, and the constant hustle were starting to take a toll. I hadn't spent as much time at home, and the nights were filled with thoughts about the next project, the next big thing. The phone calls and emails never stopped. One afternoon, as I was walking around the shop, making sure everything was in order, I overheard a conversation between two of my employees. James is doing so well, huh? I've never seen him so focused. He's really going places, one of them said. Yeah, but I've noticed he's different lately, the other one responded. He's been pushing himself too hard. He doesn't seem like the same guy. Their words hit me harder than I expected. It was true. I had changed. The man who used to enjoy the simplicity of working with his hands, the quiet life on the farm, was slowly being consumed by the demands of running a business. I had promised myself that I would stay grounded, but the weight of everything was making it hard to see that promise clearly. The next morning, I decided to take a step back. I called David and told him I needed some time off. I wasn't quitting the business, but I needed space to reconnect with myself, to remember why I started this journey in the first place. David was understanding. James, I know you're feeling the weight of it all. Take the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready. I left the shop for the next few days, taking a trip to the old farm. It was the place where I had found peace before all of this started, and it was where I hoped I could find it again. The air was fresh, the sound of birds in the distance, and the quiet was soothing. I spent the next few days walking around the property, working on small projects, and reflecting on what I had built. I realized that it wasn't the business, the success, or the recognition that mattered most. It was the connections I had made, the people I had helped, and the ability to live my life with purpose. When I returned to the shop, I felt different. The pressure was still there, But I now understood that it wasn't about doing everything at once or proving anything to anyone. It was about staying true to myself and finding a balance. I had built something that mattered, and now it was time to nurture it without losing who I was in the process. I spoke to my team and let them know that I was back, but I was going to take a more hands-on approach to the work, not just the business side. We were a team, and it was time to work together in a way that felt right for all of us. The pressure didn't disappear, but I had a renewed sense of clarity. I was in control, not the other way around. And that, in itself, was the real victory. I had finally found a balance between the fast-paced world of business and the quiet, simple life I had once known. The pressure to be everywhere at once, to keep up with the demands of a growing company, was still there, but I was learning to manage it. The shop was thriving, and more importantly, it was helping the community. People were coming in not just for repairs but to learn, to grow, and to connect with others who shared their passion for cars. It was everything I had hoped for and more. But as I stood at the front of the shop one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that there was still one thing left for me to do. I had made my mark on the business, but there was one more step I needed to take, a step that would cement everything I had worked for. I had been so focused on growing the business, on proving that I could succeed, that I hadn't fully allowed myself to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I had let my drive for success push me away from the people who mattered most. And it was time to fix that. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about the people in my life, the connections I had made, and the love and support that had carried me through. I had built this life with hard work, but I couldn't forget to appreciate the relationships that made it all possible. That evening, I called David to discuss the future of the shop. David, I've been thinking. I'm ready to take the next step, but I want to do it in a way that keeps everything I've worked for intact. I don't want to lose sight of what really matters. There was a brief pause before David responded. I think I know exactly what you mean, James. You've already created something special. The next step is making sure it continues to grow in a way that's sustainable for you and the community. We discussed the idea of hosting an event at the shop, a celebration of everything we had built so far. It wouldn't just be about showcasing the business. It would be a way to give back to the people who had supported us all along. I wanted to bring the community together to celebrate the journey we had all been on. The weeks leading up to the event were filled with preparation. We cleaned the shop, set up food and drinks, and invited everyone who had helped make the shop a success. It was a lot of work, but it felt like the right thing to do. As the night of the event arrived, I stood at the front of the shop, looking around at the people who had become like family to me. The air was filled with laughter, conversation, and the sound of clinking glasses. The twins I had saved all those months ago were there with their family, smiling and playing in the corner. David was by my side, offering words of encouragement as I took a deep breath. I stepped up to the makeshift stage at the front of the shop and looked out at the crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight. I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. This shop started out as just a dream, a way for me to do what I love. But what I've learned along the way is that it's not just about fixing cars. It's about building relationships, creating opportunities, and supporting each other. None of this would be possible without all of you. The crowd was silent for a moment, taking in my words. Then, the applause began, slow at first, and then growing into a standing ovation. It wasn't the kind of applause I had received at the charity event, but it was more meaningful. This was my community. These were the people who had helped me make my dream a reality. As the night wore on, I realized that I had found my true success, not in the size of the shop, the wealth I had accumulated, or the recognition I had received, but in the connections I had made and the lives I had touched. I had done it. I had built something meaningful, something that would last. And that was the greatest reward of all. As the last of the guests left the shop that evening, I stood outside, looking up at the stars. The event had been a success, more than I had imagined. People had come together to celebrate, to share in the growth of something special. And in that moment, I realized that the shop wasn't just a business anymore. It was a community, a family. I had spent so many years thinking success was about building something big, about proving myself. But the truth was, success wasn't measured by the size of the shop or the amount of money it brought in. It was measured by the connections I had made, the people whose lives had been touched by what we were doing. And that was worth more than any paycheck or title. As the night settled in, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had come a long way from the mechanic who had just wanted to fix cars. I had built a life that mattered, a life filled with purpose and meaning. And it wasn't just about the work. It was about the relationships, the family I had created, not just with my own blood, but with the people I had met along the way. I had a second chance to build something bigger than myself, and I had taken it. And now, it was time to look ahead. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But I knew now that I wasn't alone. I had my team, my friends, and my community. And together, we could face anything that came our way. As I walked back into the shop, the quiet hum of the building felt like home. The lights were dim. The tools were neatly placed on the workbenches, and the smell of oil and metal was familiar and comforting. I had created something real here. Something lasting. I knew that the future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had built this life with my own hands, and no matter where it took me, I was ready. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the birds singing outside, the sunlight streaming through the window. I stood by the window for a moment, just breathing in the fresh air, and I knew I had made the right choice. The life I had now, the community, the work I did, it was everything I had dreamed of. But it was also something more. It was a reminder that no matter how hard life gets, no matter how many obstacles we face, we have the power to change our own story. We have the power to create something that matters. And that's exactly what I had done. As I walked out the door, ready to start another day, I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. In this captivating journey, discover the powerful transformation of a simple mechanic who rises to success against all odds. This is a remarkable tale that echoes the essence of true millionaire stories, showcasing how ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. From humble beginnings, James' life takes an unexpected turn when he saves two twin girls from a burning car, leading him into a world of opportunity. This inspiring story is one of those millionaire stories that proves how a single act of kindness can change a person's fate forever. As James grapples with new challenges in his growing business, he must navigate the complexities of success, balancing his dreams with the weight of responsibility. Millionaire stories like this one highlight the power of resilience and the value of staying true to yourself while facing success. Join James as he embarks on a journey that explores what it truly means to build a life that matters, not just for personal gain, but for the people who come into your life along the way. In the end, this is more than just a business success story. It's a testament to how millionaire stories are not just about wealth, but about creating a meaningful legacy. Watch as James finds the balance between ambition and personal fulfillment, a timeless reminder that we all have the ability to change our own story.